The 911 dispatcher's voice crackled through my office radio. "We have a trespassing complaint at Copper Ridge Lake. Caller says a dangerous squatter refuses to leave private HOA property." I looked at the address on the screen. It was my lake, on my land, and I was the county's volunteer fire chief. The woman on the other end? The HOA president who'd been trying to steal my family's ranch for 6 months. She had no idea her emergency call was coming straight to the office where I sat, 10 feet from the dispatch console. Before I tell you how I handled this, drop a comment. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that thought they owned everything? What did you do? And quick poll, where are you watching from? I want to know how many of you have lakes or ranches where power-drunk neighbors tried to claim what's yours. My name's Flint Dockery. I'm 52 years old, third-generation cattle rancher here in Larkspur County, Montana. The Dockery Ranch, all 640 acres of it, has been in my family since 1948, when my grandfather bought it with savings from working the railroads and a VA loan after the war. Right in the center of that property sits a 12-acre spring-fed lake we call Copper Ridge Lake. My grandpa dug the irrigation ditches by hand. My father stocked it with trout in the 70s. I learned to swim there when I was 4 years old. It's not just water and fish, it's legacy. These days I run about 100 head of cattle, fix fence line until my hands bleed, and serve as the volunteer fire chief for Larkspur County. That last part's unpaid, been doing it 18 years. My office shares a dispatch system with the sheriff's department, which becomes important later. My wife Jolene's the school librarian in town. Our 2 kids moved to Billings for work, but they come home for Christmas and the 4th of July. My old man, Hank, 91 years old, Korean war vet, lives in the guest cabin and fishes from the dock every single dawn, weather permitting. Mornings on the ranch smell like pine resin and diesel from the tractor. I brew coffee in a dented percolator on the wood stove, the kind that makes your spoon stand up straight. It's a good life, a quiet life. Then the neighbors showed up. 5 years ago, an 80-acre parcel to the east got sold to some developer out of Bozeman. They carved it into 12 luxury home lots and called it Copper Ridge Estates. Cookie-cutter houses, all $850,000 each, mostly bought by retirees and remote workers fleeing California and Seattle. The HOA formed before the paint dried. Their covenants were thicker than a phone book. Here's the thing. Those properties border my fence line. From their back decks, they can see my lake, maybe a quarter mile away through the pines, but they have zero legal access. None. The lake sits entirely on my deeded land, always has. At first, the new arrivals were just confused. They'd wander up to the fence, ask politely if they could fish. I'd smile, show them the survey maps, explain the boundaries. Most folks understood. A few grumbled but moved on. Then Deirdre Vandermeer bought the corner lot. Deirdre's 58, former corporate HR executive from some tech company in San Jose. Recently divorced, relocated here for peace and nature, her words. She's yoga-toned, highlights too blonde for Montana weather, drives a white Tesla Model X with a vanity plate that reads Lake QT1. I wish I was joking. She's the kind of person who weaponizes politeness. Every sentence out of her mouth has phrases like, for the collective good, and community standards. She's a master of the paper trail, the kind who CCs 8 people on an email about a mailbox being 2 inches out of alignment. 6 months before the 911 call, Deirdre got herself elected HOA president. 2 weeks into her term, I received a certified letter at my mailbox. The envelope was so stuffed with exhibits and highlighted clauses, it felt like a brick wrapped in passive aggression. The letter claimed that some 19th century county map showed a public easement across my land to the lake. She demanded I allow HOA members walking access, a 5-foot trail, plus seasonal dock rights, and threatened legal action if I didn't respond within 30 days. I hired a surveyor and a title attorney. Cost me $3,200. The easement claim was complete fiction. The county records clerk personally confirmed no such easement ever existed. Not in 1889, not ever. I sent Deirdre the findings politely, with documentation. She didn't apologize. She pivoted. And that's when my family's quiet life turned into a war. After my title search debunked her easement fantasy, Deirdre didn't back down. She just changed tactics. 2 weeks later, she sent another letter, shorter this time, but meaner. She claimed the fence line was wrong, accused me of encroachment onto HOA common area, said I'd been stealing their land for years. I laughed when I read it. Then I stopped laughing because I realized she was serious. She hired her own surveyor, guy from out of state, no local reputation, the kind you hire when you want a specific answer instead of the truth. And here's where it gets good, or bad, depending on your perspective. I was in the barn one Tuesday morning fixing a calving pen. Hinge had rusted through and I was elbow deep in bolt cutters and WD-40 when I heard voices outside. Not friendly voices, loud, entitled voices. I walked out into the sunlight and saw 4 people marching across my property with tripods, cameras, and clipboards. 200 yards past my front gate. No permission, no phone call, just trespassing like they owned the place. Deirdre was leading the pack in yoga pants and a puffy vest that probably cost more than my truck payment. Behind her, 3 HOA board members I vaguely recognized, and a guy in a neon safety vest hauling survey equipment. I walked up slow, kept my voice calm. This is private property. I didn't give permission for any of this. Deirdre turned and gave me this syrupy smile, the kind that makes your teeth hurt. We're on the disputed boundary. Flint, our surveyor has every right to verify the property line. Your surveyor's trespassing, I said. Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff. She pulled out her phone and started recording me. Go ahead. We're documenting your harassment. One of the board members, some guy in loafers, completely wrong footwear for ranch terrain, nodded along like a bobblehead. The crunch of their designer boots on my gravel driveway sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took photos of all of them. Clear shots of their faces, their gear, their vehicle plates. Then I smiled and walked back to the barn. They stood there for a minute, confused that I wasn't escalating. Eventually, they packed up and left. That afternoon, I called my title attorney, a woman named Greer Holcomb. Greer grew up on a ranch, passed the bar on her first try, and has a reputation for chewing up bullies and spitting out settlements. I told her what happened. She didn't even hesitate. Even if the boundary were unclear, which it's not, surveyors need landowner consent or a court order to enter private property. They have neither. Here's something you need to know if you ever deal with property disputes. In Montana, trespassing to conduct a survey without permission is a misdemeanor and grounds for an injunction. Write that down. It's saved me more than once. Greer drafted a cease and desist letter that night. We sent it certified mail and email, so Deirdre couldn't claim she never got it. I also filed a formal complaint with the state surveyor licensing board. Turns out, her hired gun had violated the professional ethics code by entering my land without authorization or a legal basis. Within a week, the surveyor disavowed everything. Sent a letter to the licensing board claiming Deirdre had misled him about property ownership and instructed him to trespass. He threw her under the bus so fast she got tire tracks. Suddenly, Deirdre's big power move collapsed. The HOA board members started whispering. A couple of them sent me private apology emails saying they'd been misled about the situation. But Deirdre? She doubled down. She flooded the private HOA Facebook group with a post that made my blood boil. Local rancher threatened us with violence today. Sheriff refused to help him harass law-abiding citizens trying to verify legal boundaries. She included a screenshot of me saying, "I'm calling the sheriff," framed like I was some kind of dangerous lunatic. My wife Jolene saw it that night. A neighbor screenshotted it and sent it to her. Jolene came into the kitchen, phone in hand, face pale. "Flint, she's lying about you online." I read the post. 53 comments, all from HOA members who didn't know me, calling me aggressive, entitled, a bully. One person said I probably shouldn't be fire chief if I threaten people. I felt my jaw tighten. Jolene was humiliated. She worked at the library. Parents would see this. Gossip would spread. I put my hand over hers. Let her dig her own hole, Joe. Paper trail's on our side. But privately, I was furious. I realized Deirdre wasn't interested in the law or the truth. She was waging reputation warfare, and she was just getting started. That night, I sat on the dock with my father. The water smelled like cold stone and pine, clean and ancient. Hank didn't say much, just cast his line and muttered, "Some folks got more venom than sense." He was right, but venom or not, I wasn't backing down. 2 weeks after the surveyor incident, I drove out to my back pasture to check the water troughs. It was early morning, the kind of cold that makes your breath hang in the air like smoke. I was hauling 100 pounds of mineral supplement in the truck bed, planning to top off the feeders before the afternoon wind picked up. I got to the gate, the one on the county road easement that legally crosses a corner of HOA land to access my back 40, and found it chained shut. Not just closed, chained, with a heavy-duty padlock the size of my fist. No note, no explanation, just a big "screw you" in stainless steel. I sat there in the truck for a minute, engine idling, trying to decide if I was more angry or impressed by the audacity. I landed on angry. Lucky for me, I keep bolt cutters in the truck for exactly this kind of nonsense. Took me 90 seconds to cut through the chain. I opened the gate, drove through, checked my cattle, and drove back out. Left the cut chain on the ground as a little message of my own. Next morning, new lock, heavier chain. Now, most people would have lost their temper at that point. But I'd learned something from the surveyor ambush. Document first, react second. After Deirdre's first trespassing stunt, I'd installed a small security camera in a tree near the gate. Wildlife camera, the kind hunters use. Motion activated, night vision, saves everything to an SD card. I pulled the card that afternoon and watched the footage on my laptop. There she was, Deirdre Vandermeer, 6:15 in the morning, Tesla parked on the shoulder, installing the second lock herself. She was wearing fingerless gloves and a headlamp like she was on some kind of covert mission. The camera even caught audio. She muttered to herself as she worked, "Let's see him try to access his back section now." I saved 3 copies of that video. One on my computer, one on a thumb drive, one uploaded to the cloud. Then I drove into town and walked into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Wade Purnell has known me since high school. He's in his 60s now, retired Marine, the kind of guy who says exactly what he thinks and doesn't suffer fools. He was drinking coffee out of a mug that said, "Don't confuse your Google search with my law degree," when I walked in. I handed him the thumb drive. "You're going to want to see this." He plugged it into his computer and watched the whole clip, stone-faced. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "That's criminal mischief at minimum. Maybe obstruction of access. But she'll claim she thought it was an HOA common gate. Want me to arrest her?" "Not yet," I said. "I want her on record first. I want documentation of a pattern." Wade nodded. "Smart. Let's file an incident report, get you a case number, then if she keeps escalating, we've got a timeline. Here's a piece of advice that'll save you a world of hurt if you're ever in a property war. Document everything before you escalate to law enforcement. Video evidence with timestamps is worth more than gold in rural disputes. Judges love clarity, prosecutors love patterns." Wade printed out the incident report, handed me a copy, and promised to add extra patrols past my gate twice a week. Then I went home and sent Deirdre a registered letter, polite, factual, and absolutely dripping with legal menace. "Dear Ms. Vandermeer, I am removing your unauthorized locks from my gate on my deeded easement. Montana law is clear that interference with legal access constitutes criminal mischief under MCA 456101. Further interference will result in criminal complaints and a civil suit for damages, legal fees, and any losses incurred. Sincerely, Flint Dockery." I expected her to back off. Any reasonable person would have backed off. Deirdre called an emergency HOA board meeting instead. I heard about it later from one of the board members who was getting cold feet about the whole thing. Deirdre stood up in front of the board and said they needed to hire private security to monitor encroachment and protect HOA interests. 3 board members pushed back. They'd already spent $8,000 on legal bills and had absolutely nothing to show for it except bad press and a trespassing complaint. One guy, a retired accountant, pointed out that they were burning through reserve funds on what was clearly a personal vendetta. Deirdre shut him down. She said if they didn't show strength, property values would collapse and homeowners would revolt. She painted this picture where I was some kind of land-grabbing villain scheming to devalue their investments. The board voted 4-3 to authorize a $15,000 retainer for a law firm in Billings. 2 days later, I got a letter from that firm. Thick, official, full of words like hereby and aforementioned. The lawyer demanded I cease all hostile activities and enter mediation to resolve the dispute. I read it out loud to Jolene over dinner. When I got to the part about hostile activities, we both started laughing. "You fixed a fence and cut a lock off your own gate," Jolene said, wiping her eyes. "Real gangster behavior." "I'm a menace to society. I agreed. But underneath the humor, I could feel the stakes rising. Deirdre wasn't just annoying anymore. She was spending serious money, hiring serious lawyers, and building a paper trail that painted me as the aggressor. I realized something that night. She wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to drown me in legal fees until I gave up. She didn't know I'd already decided I'd go broke before I'd back down. Over the next month, I started getting visits from county agencies I hadn't heard from in years. It started small, then turned into a full-blown harassment campaign. First, the health department showed up. A tired-looking inspector named Gary knocked on my door with a clipboard and an apologetic expression. "Mr. Dockery, we received an anonymous complaint about sewage runoff from your property into the lake. I have to inspect. It's protocol." I took him down to the lake. He tested the water, checked my septic system, poked around for an hour, found nothing, 0 violations. He signed off on the report and said, "Whoever called this in wasted everyone's time. Your system's cleaner than most." 2 days later, the Department of Environmental Quality called. Different inspector, same story. Anonymous complaint claimed my cattle were causing algae blooms from illegal watering practices. The inspector spent half a day testing water samples from 6 different points around the lake. Results? Water quality was pristine, better than state standards. The inspector actually complimented me on my land management. Then the zoning office sent someone out. This time the complaint alleged I was running unpermitted commercial activity, specifically that I was operating guided fishing tours without a business license. I stared at the zoning officer. "I don't run fishing tours. I've never run fishing tours. This is a working cattle ranch." She shrugged. "I believe you, Mr. Dockery, but we have to investigate every complaint. That's the law." She walked the property, found no evidence of commercial activity, and left. 3 inspections, 3 agencies, 3 anonymous complaints, all filed within 48 hours of each other. I'm not a paranoid man, but I'm not stupid either. I started seeing a pattern. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the county, asked for copies of all 3 complaints. The county redacted the names like they're supposed to, but here's the thing about anonymous complaints. They're not as anonymous as people think. Each one had been submitted via email, and while the names were blacked out, the email domain was still visible. All 3 complaints came from addresses ending in @copperridgehoa.org. Deirdre wasn't just annoying me anymore. She was weaponizing county government against me, trying to bury me in inspections, paperwork, and wasted time. Each inspection cost me half a day of work. Half a day I couldn't spend fixing fence, moving cattle, or doing literally anything productive. I made copies of everything and added them to the growing file Greer was building. We were documenting a pattern of coordinated harassment. At some point, this wasn't just petty, it was actionable. But Deirdre wasn't done. On a Saturday morning in early September, I was in my fire chief office at the volunteer station. It's a small building in town, nothing fancy. 3 trucks, a kitchen, a bunk room, and an office that shares a dispatch console with the sheriff's department and EMS. I was catching up on training certifications, half listening to the radio chatter in the background. Then the radio crackled to life with a call that made my blood freeze. "Larkspur Dispatch, this is a 911 call. Caller reports trespasser on private HOA property at Copper Ridge Lake. Caller states subject refuses to identify himself, appears to be fishing illegally, possibly armed." I looked up at the console. The address on the screen was my lake, my property. The dispatcher, a woman named Rhonda who's worked dispatch for 15 years, started running through her protocol. "Ma'am, can you confirm the property ownership and your location?" The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Deirdre Vandermeer. I'd know that clipped, self-righteous tone anywhere. "It's HOA common area," Deirdre said, voice tight. "We have jurisdiction over this property. The man is hostile and trespassing. I need a deputy here immediately." Rhonda paused. I watched her pull up the GIS mapping system on her computer, cross-reference the address with county property records. Her eyes widened slightly. "Ma'am," Rhonda said carefully, "county records show that Copper Ridge Lake is on private land owned by Flint Dockery. Are you certain about the location?" There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Deirdre's voice came back, flustered now. There's an ongoing dispute about ownership. This person is squatting on contested land. Just send a deputy." "Stand by, ma'am." Rhonda looked across the room at me. I was sitting 10 feet away, staring at the console. The office smelled like burnt coffee and old radio static. That particular scent of government buildings everywhere. My hands were flat on the desk, completely calm, but my jaw was locked tight. "Chief," Rhonda said slowly, "you hearing this?" "I'm hearing it," I said. My voice was level, cold. "That's my lake. That's my property. And that's the HOA president filing a false 911 report." Rhonda's face hardened. She'd been doing this job long enough to know what a false emergency call meant. It's a crime. It wastes resources, endangers real emergencies, and clogs up a system designed to save lives. She keyed her radio. "All units, be advised. Complainant location is verified private property. No trespassing in progress." Logging this call as unfounded. Sheriff Wade Purnell's voice crackled over the radio from his patrol car. He'd been monitoring the call. "Dispatch, I'm 3 minutes out. I'll swing by the lake and document." He paused, then added, "And Rhonda, flag that call for follow-up, false reporting." I stayed in my chair, listening as Wade drove out to my property. He radioed back 10 minutes later. "No trespasser present. Lake is unoccupied. Complainant is not on scene. Closing call as unfounded." I sat there for a long moment after the radio went quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, I could hear a truck driving past on Main Street. Deirdre had just committed a crime, on a recorded line, in front of witnesses, and she had no idea I'd heard every word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the 911 call in my head, hearing Deirdre's voice crack when the dispatcher corrected her. The lie had been so automatic, so confident. She genuinely believed she could just claim ownership and make it true. But something about her desperation didn't add up. Yeah, she was a control freak. Yeah, she clearly had an ego problem. But this level of aggression, the lawyers, the complaints, the false police report, felt like more than just a power trip. Nobody fights this hard over lake access for fun. There had to be another reason. Around midnight, I got out of bed and went to my office. Jolene stirred but didn't wake up. I made a pot of coffee and pulled out every piece of paperwork I had related to Copper Ridge Estates. HOA covenants, articles of incorporation, county plat maps, meeting minutes, everything. I spread it all across the dining room table and started reading. 2 hours later, Jolene came downstairs in her bathrobe, found me surrounded by paper and highlighters. "Flint, what are you doing?" "Something's off," I said. "She's too desperate. I'm missing something." Jolene brought me a fresh cup of tea. "What are you looking for?" "I don't know yet." I kept digging, and then I found it. The HOA covenants, the legal rules governing Copper Ridge Estates, included a specific promise to all homeowners. Section 7, Paragraph 3. All residents shall have exclusive recreational access to Copper Ridge Lake for fishing, boating, and swimming, as secured by permanent easement. I read it 3 times. Then I cross-referenced it with the developer's original marketing materials, which I'd found archived on an old real estate website. The brochure was glossy, professional, full of photos, and right there on page 4 was a picture of my lake, shot from the HOA side. Telephoto lens making it look like it was right in their backyard. The caption read, "Copper Ridge Lake, your private oasis." My stomach dropped. They'd sold these homes with a promise of lake access. The developer had written it into the covenants, advertised it in the marketing, and made it part of the sales pitch. Buyers paid $850,000 believing they'd have private lake rights. But the developer never secured those rights, never approached me, never filed for an easement, never obtained permission. I pulled up county records on my laptop. The developer had applied for an easement to my lake back in 2019, before construction even started. The county planning board denied the application. I found the meeting minutes buried in the archives. The board noted that I'd objected and that no legal basis existed to grant access across private property without the owner's consent. The developer built the homes anyway, sold them anyway, and apparently just hoped no one would notice the lake access was fictional. I sat back in my chair staring at the documents. "Holy hell," I whispered. Jolene leaned over my shoulder. "What?" "The homeowners were lied to. They think they're supposed to have access to my lake because it's in their contracts. But the developer never had the right to promise that. So what does that mean?" I pulled up the HOA meeting minutes from earlier in the year, public record in Montana if the HOA is incorporated. February's minutes had a section that made everything click into place. Legal counsel advises that HOA's best path forward is to secure lake access via adverse possession claim or easement by necessity. Board authorized $50,000 litigation budget to pursue access rights and protect HOA from member claims. There it was, the real reason. Deirdre wasn't trying to steal my lake because she was petty. She was trying to steal it because homeowners were threatening to sue the HOA for fraud. If she could force me into giving access, or better yet, trick a court into granting it, she could claim the lake was always theirs and avoid a massive liability. Here's something most people don't know. Adverse possession in Montana requires open, hostile, and continuous use of property for at least 5 years. Deirdre was trying to manufacture evidence that HOA members had always used the lake, trying to start that 5-year clock by creating a false narrative of historical access. Every trespass, every photo, every complaint, she was building a fake history of use. "She's not just annoying," I said to Jolene. "She's trying to steal my land to cover up someone else's fraud." Jolene stared at the documents spread across the table. "So what do we do?" I closed my laptop and looked at her. "We stop playing defense. It's time to go on offense." Outside, a coyote yipped in the dark hills. The sound felt like an omen, something wild and hungry, circling in the dark. But I wasn't prey. Not anymore. The next morning, I called Sheriff Wade and asked if he could meet me at the diner in town. 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a back booth at Magpie's, the kind of place with red vinyl seats, bottomless coffee, and waitresses who've worked there since the Carter administration. Wade slid into the booth across from me, already halfway through a cinnamon roll the size of a dinner plate. "You sounded serious on the phone." I pulled out a folder. "I need to show you something." For the next 20 minutes, I walked him through everything. The trespass videos, the gate locking footage, the false 911 call recording, the timeline of harassment, and, most importantly, the HOA documents showing Deirdre's real motive. Wade listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a napkin. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. "She stepped in it with that 911 call," he said. "That's filing a false report, misdemeanor at minimum. I can charge her today if you want." "Will it stick?" "With the recording? Absolutely. But it's small potatoes, Flint. Probation, maybe a fine. She'll pay it and keep coming after you." I leaned forward. "I don't want small potatoes, Wade. I want her so discredited that she resigns and leaves me alone." Wade grinned, the kind of smile that made him look 20 years younger. "Then we don't just charge her with one crime. We build a case so airtight that when it goes public, the whole county knows exactly who she is." "How?" "Document everything we've got, present it all at once, and let her bury herself in front of witnesses." He tapped the folder. "You've already done the hard part. Now we make it hurt." That afternoon, I met with Greer Holcomb at her office in town. Greer's in her 40s, grew up on a ranch outside of Lewistown, and has a reputation for turning property disputes into cautionary tales. Her office smells like leather and old law books, the kind of place that makes you feel like justice might actually exist. I showed her everything I'd shown Wade. She read through it all twice, making notes in the margins with a red pen. Then she looked up at me with the kind of smile that makes opposing counsel nervous. "Flint, this is a gift. She's handed us everything we need. So what do we do?" Greer pulled out a legal pad and started sketching a strategy. 3-pronged approach. First, we file a countersuit against the HOA. Harassment, trespass, slander, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're asking for $75,000 in damages, your legal fees, lost time, reputational harm, and emotional distress. Will we get it? Maybe, maybe not. But here's the beautiful part. Montana law allows the prevailing party in property disputes to recover attorney fees. If we win, the HOA pays your legal bills and their own. Their insurance carrier is going to lose their mind when they see this. I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. What's the second prong? We file a formal bar complaint against the HOA's lawyer for pursuing frivolous claims. That puts pressure on their legal representation and makes other lawyers hesitant to take Deirdre's cases. And the third? Greer tapped her pen on the pad. We contact the developer. Show them the liability they created by promising lake access they never secured. We make it clear that if homeowners sue en masse for fraudulent marketing, the developer's looking at over $1 million in damages. Then we politely suggest they issue a public correction letter to all HOA members, clarifying that lake access was never part of the purchase and apologizing for the marketing oversight. I stared at her. You think the developer will just roll over? They'll panic. Developers live and die by reputation. One fraud lawsuit and they'll never sell another property in Montana. She smiled. We're not asking them to pay anything. Just tell the truth. It's an easy choice. Here's something critical for anyone facing a legal battle. In defamation and harassment cases, truth is your absolute defense. Document every false statement made in writing or in public forums. It's not just evidence, it's armor. That evening, I sat down with my father on the back porch. Hank was 81, his hands gnarled from decades of ranch work, but his mind was still sharp as barbed wire. Dad, I need your help with something. He looked up from his coffee. Name it. You've been fishing that lake for 40 years. You ever keep records? Hank's face split into a grin. Son, I've kept a fishing log since 1984. Every trip. Date, time, weather, what I caught, what I didn't. Got 37 notebooks in the cabin. I felt something loosen in my chest. That's perfect, Dad. That proves continuous, exclusive family use. It kills any adverse possession claim dead. Hank set down his coffee and leaned forward. That woman tried to steal our land, Flint. She lied to the law. She spit on everything your grandfather built. His voice was quiet but hard as iron. I may be old, but I'm not useless. Let's bury her. The next day, Greer filed the lawsuit. $75,000 in damages, 40 pages of exhibits, and a demand for a public accounting of all HOA expenditures related to the Lake Access campaign. She also sent the developer a courtesy letter, professional. They are polite and absolutely terrifying. Dear Sir, we represent Flint Dockery in a property dispute with Copper Ridge Estates HOA. Discovery has revealed that your marketing materials promised lake access that was never secured. This constitutes potential fraud under Montana consumer protection statutes. Homeowners may have claims exceeding $1 million. We recommend you immediately issue a clarifying statement to all residents. Please confirm receipt. The developer's lawyer called Greer within 2 hours. By end of business that day, the developer had agreed to send a letter to every HOA member, clarifying that Copper Ridge Lake was never part of their purchase, apologizing for any confusion in marketing materials, and confirming that the lake is and always has been private property owned by the Dockery family. Deirdre was about to lose her entire foundation, but we weren't done. Greer had one more move. She called Deirdre's lawyer and proposed informal mediation at the county commissioner's office. Neutral ground, a chance to resolve things amicably. Deirdre agreed immediately. She probably thought she could negotiate some kind of access agreement, maybe offer a settlement, salvage the situation. She had no idea we were setting a trap. Greer requested that Sheriff Wade and the county attorney attend as neutral witnesses, just to keep things official, she said. Deirdre never asked why we needed witnesses for an informal mediation, and that was her last mistake. 3 days before the scheduled mediation, I was checking my cattle in the east pasture. It was early morning, the kind of cold October day where frost clings to the fence wire and your breath makes clouds. I was counting heads, making sure everyone was accounted for, when I noticed something off. The cattle weren't moving right. A dozen head were clustered near the water trough, but they looked lethargic. Heads down, not grazing. One heifer was drooling, stumbling slightly when she walked. My gut clenched. I'd seen sick cattle before, bloat, pneumonia, foot rot, but this looked different. This looked like poisoning. I called Doc Reardon, the local large animal vet, and he was at my place within the hour. He examined 3 of the worst-looking animals, drew blood samples, and tested the water in the trough. 20 minutes later, he walked back to where I was standing by the fence, his face grim. Flint, your water's contaminated. Ethylene glycol. What's that? Antifreeze. I felt the world tilt slightly. Someone poisoned my cattle? Not enough to kill them, but enough to make them sick. Another day or two of drinking this and you'd have lost some. He pointed at the trough. This isn't accidental runoff. Somebody dumped it directly into your water supply. The trough was fed by a spring that ran through a culvert under the county road, the same road that bordered HOA property. Anyone could access that culvert from the other side of the fence. I should have put a camera there months ago. I realize that now. Too late. Or maybe not too late. I had one game camera left in my truck. I installed it that afternoon, hidden in brush near the culvert, angled to catch anyone approaching from the road. Then I waited. 2 nights later, I checked the camera's SD card. The footage was crystal clear. Timestamp 2:17 a.m. A white Tesla Model X pulled onto the shoulder of the county road, headlights off. The driver's door opened. A figure in dark clothing and a headlamp stepped out, carrying a plastic jug. The person walked to the culvert, crouched down, and poured something from the jug into the water. Then they stood up, checked their surroundings, and walked back to the car. As they turned, the headlamp illuminated their face for just a second. Deirdre Vandermeer. I played the footage 3 times just to be sure. Then I saved it to 2 thumb drives and uploaded it to the cloud. The next morning, I drove straight to Sheriff Wade's office. He watched the footage without saying a word. When it finished, his jaw was so tight I could see the muscles working. "Poisoning livestock is a felony in Montana," he said quietly. "Up to 10 years in prison, $50,000 fine. This isn't harassment anymore, Flint. This is serious criminal conduct." "Can you prove it was her?" "The vehicle plate is visible. The face is identifiable. You've got the jug, the timestamps, and the vet report." He stood up and grabbed his radio. "I'm getting a search warrant for her property. If we find antifreeze that matches the brand, a funnel, gloves, anything, she's done. Here's something everyone should know. Felony livestock poisoning charges require proof of intent. But security footage plus physical evidence equals an airtight case. Rural prosecutors don't mess around when it comes to attacking someone's livelihood." Wade's deputies executed the search warrant that afternoon. I wasn't there, but Wade called me later with the results. Found a half-empty jug of antifreeze in her garage, same brand the vet identified. Also found a plastic funnel with residue and a pair of stained work gloves shoved in a garbage bag. She kept the evidence? Most criminals aren't as smart as they think they are. Wade paused. "Flint, I need to ask. Do you want me to arrest her now? Or wait until after your mediation?" I thought about it. If Wade arrested her before the mediation, she might lawyer up completely, claim she was being persecuted, maybe even generate some sympathy. But if we waited, if she walked into that mediation thinking she still had the upper hand, the fall would be so much harder. "Wait," I said. "Let her come to the mediation, then arrest her in front of everyone." Wade was quiet for a moment, then he chuckled, low and dark. "You've got a mean streak, Dockery." "She poisoned my animals, Wade. She tried to kill my cattle to pressure me into giving up my land. Mean doesn't even cover it." But before Wade could move forward, Deirdre made one last desperate play. She called an emergency HOA board meeting that night. I heard about it the next day from the same board member who'd been feeding Greer information, the retired accountant who was horrified by Deirdre's behavior. At the meeting, Deirdre proposed an immediate $30,000 settlement offer to me. She claimed it was in everyone's best interest to resolve things quickly and avoid further legal costs. 2 board members, good people who'd finally seen enough, resigned on the spot. "We're not covering your criminal conduct," one of them said. "You've gone too far, Deirdre. You've made us all look like monsters." But Deirdre convinced the remaining 3 members to authorize the payment. She spun a story about me being vindictive, about the sheriff harassing her because she was an outsider, about needing to stand together against local bullies. She was hemorrhaging support, losing board members, and facing felony charges. And she still thought she could buy her way out. The accountant who'd resigned sent Greer a message that night. "She's panicking. She knows she's in trouble. Most of us want her gone, but she's threatening to sue anyone who tries to remove her as president. Please help us end this." I read the message and felt something cold settle in my chest. Deirdre wasn't just an annoyance anymore. She was dangerous, cornered, and cornered animals do desperate things. But we were 24 hours from the mediation. One more day, and this would all be over. The morning after the emergency HOA meeting, Deirdre went nuclear. She contacted a regional TV news station out of Billings, one of those affiliates that does investigative pieces on local corruption and consumer protection. She pitched them a story. Wealthy rancher uses political connections to bully retirees out of promised lake access. The station sent a reporter. Young guy, maybe 26, eager to make a name for himself with a David versus Goliath story. His name was Trevor something, and he showed up at Copper Ridge Estates with a camera crew on a Wednesday afternoon. I heard about it while I was replacing a section of fence. One of the neighbors, an older couple who'd apologized to me weeks ago, called to warn me. "Flint, there's a news crew at Deirdre's house. She's doing an interview, thought you should know." I drove into town and called Greer from the truck. "Deirdre's talking to TV News. Should I be worried?" "Did they contact you for comment?" "Not yet." "Then let her talk. She'll hang herself." 2 hours later, Trevor the reporter called my cell phone. "Mr. Dockery, I'm working on a story about a property dispute between you and the Copper Ridge Estates HOA. Would you be willing to go on camera?" "No, but I'll provide a written statement and documentation." "Documentation?" "Everything. The full story with evidence." I met him at a coffee shop in town an hour later. Brought a folder 6 inches thick. Copies of every trespass video, the 911 call recording, the false complaint timeline, the lawsuit filing, the vet report on the poisoned cattle, and the search warrant return showing antifreeze found in Deirdre's garage. Trevor's eyes got wider with every page he turned. "Mr. Dockery, this is not the story she told me. I imagine it's not." He spent 40 minutes reviewing everything, taking notes, occasionally muttering "holy crap" under his breath. When he finished, he looked up at me. "She told me you were threatening her, that you refused any reasonable compromise, that the sheriff was helping you because you were, quote, part of the local good old boys network. And what do the documents tell you?" He tapped the folder. "That she's been waging a coordinated harassment campaign, trespassed multiple times, filed false reports, and allegedly poisoned your livestock." He paused. "Did she really call 911 and claim you were trespassing on your own property?" "It's on tape, dispatch recording. I was in the room when she made the call." Trevor sat back and shook his head. "Mr. Dockery, I need to ask you something off the record. Why didn't you come forward with this story yourself?" "Because I'm not interested in media attention. I'm interested in being left alone on my own land." He nodded slowly. "Can I use this material for a story?" "That's why I gave it to you." 2 days later, one day before the mediation, the story aired on the 6 p.m. news. The segment opened with footage of Copper Ridge Estates, all those beautiful luxury homes against the Montana hills. Then it cut to Trevor's voiceover. "What started as a property dispute has turned into allegations of harassment, false police reports, and felony livestock poisoning. Tonight, we investigate an HOA president accused of waging a campaign of intimidation against a local rancher." They showed a 15-second clip of Deirdre from her interview, tearfully claiming she was being bullied. Then they cut to the evidence, the 911 call audio, Deirdre's voice, clear as day, lying to dispatch, the gate-locking video, her face visible in the headlamp glow, the timeline of false complaints, the vet report. Sheriff Wade appeared on camera, professional and measured. "We executed a search warrant and recovered evidence consistent with livestock poisoning. Charges are pending." The piece ended with Trevor standing in front of my ranch gate. "The Dockery family has owned this land since 1948. What started as a dispute over lake access has escalated into criminal allegations and a $75,000 lawsuit. The HOA president declined to comment after we shared the evidence. The mediation is scheduled for tomorrow. We'll continue to follow this story." My phone started ringing 10 minutes after the segment aired. Jolene called first. "Flint, are you watching?" "I'm watching." "The comments on the station's Facebook page are insane. Everyone's on your side." I pulled up the post. 1,200 comments in 20 minutes. People were sharing their own HOA horror stories, calling for Deirdre's arrest, praising Sheriff Wade for taking it seriously. 3 Copper Ridge residents sent me private messages apologizing. One wrote, "We had no idea she was lying to us. Most of us just want to live in peace. Please know we don't support what she did." Another message came from the retired accountant who'd been feeding information to Greer. 6 more board members just resigned. She's the only one left. And our HOA insurance carrier just sent a letter saying they won't cover her legal defense because poisoning livestock constitutes intentional criminal conduct outside the policy. She's completely alone now. That night, Deirdre sent me an email. The subject line was empty. The message was 3 sentences. "I'll resign as HOA president if you drop all charges in the lawsuit, please. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve prison." I showed it to Jolene and Greer over speakerphone. Jolene's voice was soft. "Part of me feels bad for her, Flint." Greer was less sympathetic. "She poisoned cattle. She lied to 911. She tried to steal your land and destroy your reputation. Don't respond to this email. Let her come to the mediation tomorrow and face the consequences." I stared at the email for a long time. In another life, maybe I would have felt pity, but all I could think about was my heifer stumbling near the water trough, drooling from antifreeze poisoning. I thought about my father's fishing logs, 40 years of family history she'd tried to erase with lies. "I'm not responding," I said. That night, I barely slept. I kept dreaming about my grandfather clearing this land with a mule team and a stubborn refusal to quit. He'd built something that was supposed to last generations. Deirdre had tried to take it. Tomorrow, in front of witnesses, she was going to learn what it cost. The county commissioner's conference room smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. It was 10 a.m. on a Thursday, and the room was more crowded than I'd expected. Present, me and Greer on one side of the table. Deirdre and her lawyer, a nervous-looking guy from Billings who kept adjusting his tie, on the other. Sheriff Wade stood near the back wall in full uniform, arms crossed. The county attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Carr, sat at the head of the table with a legal pad. 3 HOA board members, subpoenaed as witnesses, sat along the side wall looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over her stenography machine. Deirdre looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her makeup was heavy, trying to cover dark circles. Her hands shook slightly as she arranged papers in front of her. I wore clean jeans, a pressed ranch shirt, and boots I'd polished that morning. Calm, ready. The county commissioner, a retired judge named Albert Kohler, opened the session. "This is an informal mediation to address the property dispute between Mr. Flint Dockery and the Copper Ridge Estates HOA, along with related criminal and civil matters. Mr. Dockery, you requested this session. Please state your position." I stood up slowly. Greer had coached me. Stay calm, stick to facts, let the evidence do the work. "Commissioner, with respect, I'm not here to mediate. I'm here to present evidence of criminal harassment, trespass, false reporting, and felony livestock poisoning. So everyone in this room knows exactly what's been happening for the past 6 months." Deirdre's lawyer started to object, but Commissioner Kohler held up a hand. "Let him speak." I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's projection screen. Greer handed me the remote. "First, let's talk about trespassing." I played the surveyor video. Deirdre and 3 board members marching onto my property without permission, setting up equipment, refusing to leave when asked. Timestamp visible, faces clear. The board members in the room shifted uncomfortably. Second, obstruction of access. Gate locking footage. Deirdre at 6:15 a.m. installing a padlock on my gate, muttering about preventing my access to my own back pasture. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s, put her face in her hands. Third, filing a false emergency report. I played the 911 audio over the speakers. Deirdre's voice filled the room, confident and lying. HOA common area, trespasser, possibly armed. Then the dispatcher's correction. "Ma'am, county records show that property is owned by Flint Dockery." Deirdre's face went pale. "I was in the dispatch office when she made that call," I said quietly. "I'm the volunteer fire chief." I heard her lie to 911 about my own property, trying to get law enforcement to remove me from my own land. Patricia Carr, the county attorney, made a note. Fourth, coordinated harassment through false complaints. I displayed the timeline. 3 anonymous complaints to 3 different agencies within 48 hours, all from @copperridgehoa.org email addresses. Each inspection found 0 violations. Fifth, the real motive. I pulled up the HOA meeting minutes, read aloud the section about adverse possession strategy and the $50,000 litigation budget. Then I showed the developers marketing materials, photos of my lake, promises of access that were never secured. Ms. Vandermeer wasn't fighting for recreation rights. She was trying to manufacture a false claim of ownership to protect the HOA from homeowner lawsuits over fraudulent marketing. She was willing to steal my family's land to cover up someone else's lies. The room was completely silent. And finally, felony livestock poisoning. I showed the culvert footage. The white Tesla, the figure with the headlamp pouring liquid from a jug, the face illuminated for 1 clear second. Then I put up the vet report, ethylene glycol in the water, cattle sickened, then the search warrant return, half-empty antifreeze jug, stained funnel. Contaminated gloves, all found in Deirdre's garage. Ms. Vandermeer poisoned my animals to pressure me into surrender. She committed a felony to try to force me off my own land. I turned off the projector and looked directly at Deirdre. You didn't want reasonable access. You wanted to fraudulently claim ownership so HOA members wouldn't sue you for the developer's lies. You were willing to poison my livestock, destroy my reputation, and waste public resources, all to cover your own liability. The room felt like the air had been sucked out of it. The only sound was the quiet clicking of the court reporter's machine. Patricia Carr spoke first. Mr. Dockery, are you pressing charges? On the poisoning, absolutely. On the false 911 call, yes. I paused and looked at the three board members. On the trespassing and harassment complaints, that depends. I sat down. Greer stood up. The board has a choice, she said. Remove Ms. Vandermeer immediately, issue a public apology, and pay Mr. Dockery's legal fees, currently $18,000. In exchange, we'll drop the civil suit. But the criminal charges proceed regardless. Deirdre's lawyer leaned over and whispered urgently in her ear. She shook her head violently, tears starting to stream down her face. We were promised, the homes, it's not fair. Sheriff Wade stepped forward. Ms. Vandermeer, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal poisoning of livestock under Montana Code 81-1-111 and filing a false emergency report under MCA 45-8-113. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Two deputies who'd been waiting in the hallway came in. Wade cuffed her hands behind her back while she sobbed. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. The deputies escorted her out. The door closed behind them. The three board members sat frozen for a moment. Then they got up, stepped into the hallway, and I could hear urgent whispered conversation. 90 seconds later, they came back in. The woman who'd had her face in her hands spoke. Her voice was shaking. We accept your terms. Ms. Vandermeer is removed as HOA president effective immediately. We'll draft a public apology and settlement agreement today. I nodded. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I have no issue with your residence. I never did. I just have a problem with people who lie and break the law. Commissioner Kohler looked at me with something like respect. Mr. Dockery, this mediation is concluded. The criminal proceedings will move forward through the appropriate channels. Greer and I packed up our materials and walked out into the bright October sunshine. In the parking lot, she turned to me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Tired, relieved, ready to go home and check on my cattle. She smiled. You did good, Flint. You didn't just win. You showed people how to fight back without becoming the villain. I looked back at the county building, thinking about Deirdre in the back of a patrol car, facing felony charges and professional ruin. She made her choices, I said. I just made sure she faced the consequences. We shook hands, and I drove home to my ranch. 3 months later, Deirdre Vandermeer pleaded guilty in district court. The prosecutors offered her a deal, plead to reduce charges and avoid trial. She took it. Misdemeanor false report, 6 months probation. Felony livestock poisoning, 2 years probation, $25,000 in restitution paid directly to me, and 200 hours of community service. She also lost her real estate license. Turns out she'd been dabbling in luxury property sales on the side, and the state board doesn't look kindly on felony convictions, so she sold her Copper Ridge home at a $90,000 loss and moved out of state. Last I heard, she was in Arizona somewhere. I don't think about her much. The HOA settled with me exactly as promised. $18,000, every penny of my legal fees, plus a public letter published in the county newspaper. The letter apologized for the harassment, clarified that Copper Ridge Lake has always been and remains private Dockery family property. And this part made me smile, praised my patience and professionalism throughout a difficult situation. Greer framed a copy of that letter and hung it in her office. She says it's the most satisfying apology she's ever extracted from an HOA. But here's the thing about winning, it's not really over until you decide what comes next. 2 weeks after the settlement, I invited every resident of Copper Ridge Estates to a ranch open house, BBQ, ranch tours, and fishing demonstrations. I half expected nobody to show up. 43 people came, families with kids, retirees, the apologetic board members, even a few folks who'd initially supported Deirdre but later realized they'd been lied to. They showed up with homemade pies, 6-packs of local IPA, and handwritten apology notes. One elderly couple, transplants from Oregon, brought me a rhubarb pie, and damn near cried when they apologized. We trusted her, the wife said. We didn't know she was lying about everything. We stood on the hill overlooking the lake, and one of the younger residents, a guy who worked remotely for some tech company, grinned and said, "So, can we at least look at the lake from your property?" I laughed. "Look all you want. Fish it. That'll cost you a 6-pack of local IPA and advance permission." But I meant the first part. And over the next few weeks, I set up something that felt right. Twice a year now, spring and fall, I host Copper Ridge Community Fishing Day. Any local resident, HOA member or not, can reserve a spot. $20 per person, catch and release only, barbecue lunch included. All proceeds go to the volunteer fire department. It sold out the first year. 80 people showed up. Kids learning to cast, retired folks swapping stories, my father Hank holding court on the dock, teaching a 10-year-old girl how to tie a clinch knot. Boundaries don't have to mean hostility. I protected my rights fiercely, but I left room for reconciliation. That matters. As for the $25,000 restitution Deirdre paid, I didn't keep it. I used every penny to establish the Hank Dockery Scholarship, $2,500 a year, awarded to a Larkspur County student pursuing studies in agriculture, environmental science, or land management. The first recipient was the daughter of one of the board members who'd resigned in protest during Deirdre's reign, 16 years old, planning to study rangeland ecology at Montana State. My father cried when I told him about the scholarship. Not sad tears, proud ones. "Your grandfather would have loved this," he said. "He always believed land was something you held in trust for the next generation." The local newspaper ran a follow-up story 6 months after the mediation. Feel-good piece with a photo of me in my fire chief uniform standing next to the lake. Headline: From conflict to community, rancher turns legal battle into scholarship fund. Jolene framed that one and hung it in our kitchen. My father's health stabilized after the stress lifted. He's 91 now, still fishes every morning the weather allows. He jokes that he outlived the carpetbaggers and plans to do the same to the next batch of troublemakers, should any arrive. I also donated 40 acres of the ranch, the northwest corner, steep terrain, beautiful but not great for cattle, to the County Land Conservancy. Tax write-off, yes, but more importantly, it means that land will never be developed. It'll stay wild forever. The Conservancy put up a small sign at the trailhead. Dockery Family Conservation Easement. That sign will outlive all of us. So that's how I handled an HOA president who thought she could steal my family's lake by calling 911 and lying to dispatch. Not knowing the call came straight to my office. I didn't fight her with anger. I fought her with documentation, patience, and an airtight legal strategy. I let her dig her own grave, then I buried her in evidence. And when it was over, I didn't gloat. I built something better. If you've got an HOA nightmare story, or any story about standing up to petty tyrants who thought they could push you around, drop it in the comments below. I want to hear how you fought back. And if you're facing something similar right now, remember this. Document everything, stay calm, and never underestimate the power of the truth. Hit that subscribe button, because next week I'm telling you about the time a city building inspector tried to condemn my barn over a bogus code violation, and I made him pay for the repairs himself. Stay sharp out there, folks. Protect what's yours. And remember, the land doesn't belong to whoever shouts the loudest. It belongs to whoever has the deed.